You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I want to start with Kyle Shanahan getting a huge extension for 6 years. My God, you make the Super Bowl once and you get a 6-year extension. In all seriousness, I mean, I'm not a big fan of his father, and I don't think he's a perfect head coach. You know, the biggest thing with Shanahan is he can never pick, and this goes back to his father, he can never pick one offensive playmaker. And what I mean by that is, every year, it seems like the Niners just have someone different stepping up. I mean, besides George Kittle and Garoppolo, and even then, can you really count Garoppolo? This is his one full year. He's never had that consistency. You know, I understand that last year was a magical season. Everything comes together. The defense plays great. Garoppolo steps up. I mean, the Niners had the second best offense in the league last year, and they had a top 10 defense, according to points for and points against per game. But this is a guy who just, you know, he has a lot of issues to me. I'm not 100% sold on Kyle Shanahan being a great head coach. Can you tell me that Kyle Shanahan is a great head coach right now? Can you say that with any sense of honesty? Dante Pettis is supposed to step up. Pettis does nothing. They can't decide on a running back. They end up going with Raheem Mostert, an undrafted free agent. Mostert isn't great. He had a good season, but he's not a great running back. Marquise Goodwin does nothing. He ends up being traded. I mean, Carlos Hyde in Shanahan's first year there had a good season. They got rid of him. That's the biggest thing to me with Shanahan. This guy just can't decide on a system. He can't decide on what players are going to be his bell cow guys. Now, last year, it worked for him. Mostert played great. Garoppolo finally stayed healthy. And Garoppolo's not a sure thing either. George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league. Deebo Samuel looks like he's going to be a really good player in this league for a long time, assuming Shanahan doesn't mess him up. They traded for Emmanuel Sanders. Great move. But now when you look at that Niners team, it just goes back to my point. That this guy can't settle in on offensive playmakers. Again, they traded Goodwin. They let Samuel walk. They they let Sanders walk, not Samuel. Samuel's there for a long time. They drafted Brandon Ayuk. I like Ayuk. I think Ayuk is going to be a really good player in this league for a long time, assuming Shanahan uses him. You know, they signed Tevin Coleman to a big contract. Coleman's terrible. And you can't put that on John Lynch. Shanahan has a lot of say in that front office. I know he does. I mean, I can't take the 13-3 season away. They go to the Super Bowl. They come close to winning it. I get that. And Shanahan's a good coach. But 6 years is a lot for a guy who's partially responsible for the destruction of RG3. That's the biggest thing to me. There is no excuse for Robert Griffin III not having been great. And Kyle Shanahan and his father deserve a ton of blame for that. They ruined that poor guy's career. They rushed him back from injury. He's not the same player. He gets hurt again. And then it's the Kirk Cousins show. If Kyle Shanahan is the offensive guru that everyone says he is, RG3 would still be a Redskin. And they wouldn't have Dwayne Haskins. But because the Shanahans go through offensive players like crazy, and they did this with Donovan McNabb too, RG3 is doomed to be a backup. He should have been so much better than he was. It's like Mark Sanchez. Sanchez should have been so much better than he was. That wasn't a talent thing. That was just a confidence thing, that stupid Tebow trade. Double down on your quarterback, for God's sake. Instead, you bring in Tim Tebow. Unreal. Same thing with the Redskins. Double down on your quarterback. Instead, you go with Kirk Cousins. Look, I understand that Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback. I like Cousins. I really do. Wanted him on the Jets. But you give up an arm and a leg to move up for RG3, and you misuse him like crazy. Yeah, he has the great rookie season. He wins Rookie of the Year. He makes the Pro Bowl. Sophomore season, 2013. He wasn't as good, but there was still talent there. He gets hurt to finish the season. Kirk Cousins comes in. Looks terrible. 2014. RG3 is back. Griffin gets hurt the second week of the season. Then he gets rushed back in week 9 because Cousins was really bad. I mean, I'll tell you what Cousins did that year. Cousins completed just under 62% of his passes, threw 10 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He was not that good. I mean, Colt McCoy looked like the better quarterback. Then 2015, Griffin out for the year. Still suffering ill effects from injury. The injuries just piled on because he was misused so much. He didn't have time to properly heal, and when that happens, you're at greater risk for other injuries. Then 2015, Cousins puts it all together, and he looks like the better quarterback. Did it all work out for the Redskins in the end? I mean, Cousins wasn't there for that much longer. Redskins didn't give him a big contract. They end up trading for Alex Smith. Smith gets hurt. And then they draft Dwayne Haskins. The bottom line is, Kyle Shanahan is just a good coach. He got this job because he's Mike Shanahan's son. I understand the one great season. Second best team in the NFL. I get that. Shanahan's not terrible, but to give him 6 years is absurd. And he has way too much power in that organization. He has the 53-man roster control. And he's now one of the top 5 highest paid coaches in the NFL. He just doesn't deserve it. Massively overrated. Hopefully they lock down Lynch too. Moving on now to hockey. There are a couple hockey stories that I want to talk about. And I'll start with Ryan Reaves getting a 2-year extension worth $3.5 million total. I like Reaves. Physical player. Solid fourth liner. Plays the game the right way. He's not a dirty player. He's just a really physical player on a Golden Knights team that doesn't have another physical player. You know, I come from the school of you need at least one goon. If a guy is gonna mess up Max Pacioretty or Mark Stone or Riley Smith, you sick the goon on him and he doesn't do that again. See, hockey is better when the players police themselves. Reaves is a solid fourth liner, one of the best fourth liners in the league. The contract is very fair for him. He's a durable player. I like the move. Moving on now to the Buffalo Sabres firing Jason Botterill as their GM and replacing him with Kevyn Adams. For those of you who don't know who Kevyn Adams is, he was a coach for the Sabres. Then he went into the front office. He was the senior vice president of business administration. And now he's the GM. Adams is a former player. He was a solid third-line center in his day. Not great, not terrible. The lack of experience is what concerns me about Adams, but I'll get into that in a minute. I want to talk about Botterill being fired first. Jason Botterill came to the Sabres from the Penguins as a guy with a reputation of being a really smart guy. And I think everyone thought that Botterill would do a really good job with the Sabres, but it just didn't work. You know, there are a lot of people that are up in arms over him being fired. The record doesn't lie. In his 3 seasons, the Sabres have been dreadful. They've never finished with more than 33 wins. They never finished higher than 6th in the division. What were his big moves? Drafting Jack Eichel? My dead grandmother would have known to pick Jack Eichel once Connor McDavid was off the board. Drafting Rasmus Dahlin? Again, my dead grandmother would have known to draft Rasmus Dahlin. He traded for Jeff Skinner. Skinner had 1 good year with the Sabres. This year he was terrible. He went out and signed Carter Hutton to be the goalie. Hutton has been terrible. There are a lot of Sabres fans that don't like that Botterill was fired. I just don't get it. This guy has failed as GM. The people who were upset at firing Botterill, I think, are combining 2 things. They're combining the firing of Botterill with the hiring of Kevyn Adams. Don't combine the 2. Did they fire Botterill to hire Kevyn Adams? Yeah, probably. And that's stupid. Alright, Kevyn Adams has very limited front office experience. Before he got to the Sabres front office, he was on the management team of the LECOM Harbor Center. Whatever the hell that is. You know, he has a good relationship with the owners, and that's always risky when you get the job because you have a good relationship with the owners. That usually doesn't end well. I'm with you that Kevyn Adams should not be the GM of the Sabres. But Jason Botterill should have been fired. If you want to tell me you have more faith in Botterill than you do Adams, I can accept that because Botterill at least, came from a hockey background. Adams, after he left the bench of the Sabres, managed a stadium. Then he went over to the business side of things for the Sabres. Now he's the GM. How is that going to work? Don't be upset that Botterill was fired. Botterill should have been fired. Botterill did not do a good job with the Sabres. I like his sister a lot more. Jennifer Botterill is the sideline reporter for some Islanders games. Or the rinkside reporter, whatever you want to call her for hockey. She'll sometimes stand between the benches. Her and AJ Malesko do a good job. Botterill should have been fired, but to replace him with Kevyn Adams, that's tough. That's a hard one to justify. I am with Sabres fans there that that's not going to work. But be happy that you got rid of Botterill. Try to look on the bright side of life. Maybe Adams will work out, although I highly doubt it. Alright, I'm not going to do the trifecta today because the only thing worth talking about for this day in sports history is Tony Gwynn. You don't need me to tell you about Tony Gwynn. One of the best hitters of all time. Died way too young. You already know that. So I'm only going to do 2/3 of the trifecta, starting by recapping the New Orleans Saints' draft class. The Saints only made 4 picks in this whole draft. Part of that is because the Saints traded their 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks to move up to the end of the 3rd round to take Adam Troutman. And they also made some other trades in there, but the bottom line is when you only have 4 picks, I'm going to ding you a little bit for that. Luckily for the Saints, though, they didn't have too many holes on their roster. I mean, they're a great team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know they're a great team. As long as you have Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas and Sean Payton as your head coach, you'll be fine. Want to tell me Brees doesn't have a lot left in the tank? Okay, fine. I'm with you there. We all know that Brees is gearing up for the end, but until he falls off, there's nothing stopping him from throwing for 4,000 yards and 30 to 40 touchdowns. It's like all the doom and gloom people with Tom Brady saying, this is the year he falls off, this is the year he falls off. Until he does it, shut up. I did not like the Cesar Ruiz pick. I had him as the 47th best prospect in this draft. ESPN had him as the 37th best prospect. He ended up going 24. I understand that when you're a great team, you have the luxury of reaching for a need. But offensive line wasn't a huge need for the Saints. It made sense to pick an offensive lineman for one last run with Breeze, but they didn't really need an offensive lineman. I can't kill the pick too much, though. I'd give it a B-. Reaves is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none, except for pass protection. He was one of the best pass blockers in this draft. The thing is, he has a really low ceiling. I do not think that Cesar Ruiz is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. And when you're taken in the first round, you want a guy who's going to make a bunch of Pro Bowls. It's why I had a second-round grade on him. And a mid-second-round grade at that. I think Ruiz will be fine for the Saints. The pick made a little bit of sense, since you want to protect Breeze for this last run. But it wasn't a huge need. I'm not sold on Ruiz's ceiling. I wasn't crazy about that pick. I was crazy about the Zach Bourne pick, though. I had Bourne as the 31st best prospect in this draft. I almost mocked him 23 to the Patriots. Nick had him go 26 to the Dolphins. He slipped to the third round, and I have no idea why. This guy is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. I mean, he just jumps off the tape when you watch him play. He was fantastic at Wisconsin. 71 tackles for 12.5 sacks. I understand he doesn't have the best frame in the world, and there's some people that think he has durability concerns because of that. But I think this guy is going to be around for 10 to 15 years. Again, it wasn't a huge need, but when you can grab a first rounder in the third round, you do it. Especially when you're a team that really doesn't have any glaring needs at all. That pick made a lot of sense. I had an early third round grade on Adam Troutman. ESPN had a late second round grade on him. The Saints traded up to get him at the end of the third round, and they gave up an arm and a leg to get him. The thing is, though, they really didn't need a tight end. Jared Cook and Josh Hill are solid. And they also have Taysom Hill, who sometimes plays tight end. I love Taysom Hill. Troutman's a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. Fantastic year at Dayton, was team captain, broke the school's record for catches in a season with 70, had 916 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. He's not the best blocker in the world, but he's a really good receiver, good separation skills, good ball skills, durable player, good frame. I think Troutman has a solid career ahead of him. I just don't like that the Saints traded up so much to get him. They didn't need to do that. Then, in the 7th round, there was a little bit of controversy. The Saints traded up to the 240th overall pick. That's in the 7th round. They gave up a 6th rounder in 2021 to do it. And they used that pick to take Tommy Stevens. Okay? Why was that so controversial? Well, since the Saints had no day 3 picks after trading up for Troutman, they used day 3 to prioritize their undrafted free agents. And they coveted Tommy Stevens. They think that Stevens is gonna fill that Taysom Hill role when Hill takes over for Breeze. you can think what you want to about Breeze being succeeded by Hill. I don't think that's going to work either, but the Saints do. But they like that gadget role, and they think that Stevens can do that. As the draft was coming to a close, the Saints were gearing up to sign Stevens. But the Panthers wanted him too. The Panthers offered him a lot of money, so did the Saints. It got to the point where Stevens stopped answering the Saints' phone calls. So it looked like he was going to sign with the Panthers in undrafted free agency. That prompted Peyton to trade back up, to trade into the 7th round to draft Stevens. Look, it's nothing against Stevens. I think he can be that gadget guy. He's a big guy, athletic guy, really good runner, great arm strength. The thing is, though, you watch him play, you just know he's not going to be an NFL quarterback. In fact, there were a lot of people, including NFL.com, to compare him to Taysom Hill. Nothing against the Saints trading up for him, but the controversy is a little interesting for a 7th rounder. NFL rules state that you can talk to players who may become undrafted free agents, but you can't discuss terms. It seems like both the Panthers and Saints did that. It's not the end of the world. Any punishment would probably be minor, but it's still kind of interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how Stevens copes with that, if it's an issue at all. I think Stevens can work in a gadget role. He gets to learn from Taysom Hill. I mean, there's no better mentor for that than him. I like Stevens. I think that can work. All in all, I have to ding the Saints a little bit for only having 4 picks. None of their picks really filled a glaring need. I'm going to give them a C+. I think that's very fair for a draft class that only had 4 players. I like the players they took, but still, only 4 picks. It's hard to get behind that. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the Dallas Stars now. I'm sure you know that they were once the Minnesota North Stars. They've only won 1 Stanley Cup despite making 3 in 81. They lost to the Islanders in, I think that was Dino Ciccarelli's rookie year. In 91, they lost to the Penguins for the Penguins' first Stanley Cup. I'm just trying to remember if 80-81 was Ciccarelli's first year in the NHL. I think it was. I'm just trying to look it up now. It was. Okay. Alright, good memory by me. The correct Mount Rushmore is Mike Modano, Neil Broughton, Brian Bellows, and Dino Ciccarelli. Mike Modano at 1 is really self-explanatory. One of the best players in the NHL when he played. Won a Stanley Cup with the Stars in 99. Was by far and away their best skater. I don't know if you would want to say best player because Ed Belfour was insane that year. But Modano was just a sensational player. I remember watching him play. I remember loving watching him play. It's terrible that he spent that 1 year with the Red Wings. I hated that Modano did it. I hated that Brodeur signed with the Blues. There are just some players that you don't want to see in other uniforms. Neil Broughton came over from Lake Placid after the Miracle on Ice and the U.S. beating Sweden to sign with the North Stars. Was really good in their playoff run. Had 8 points in 19 games. And throughout the 80s and early to mid-90s was one of the better players in the league. Second all-time in points for the Stars. Good defensive forward. Very few people remember that he was part of that Miracle on Ice team. Brian Bellows is one of the most underrated players in NHL history. He has over 1,000 points, but very few people know that. He made an all-star team for the Stars. He's a borderline Hall of Famer. Was a great player in his era. Absolutely great. And Dino Ciccarelli is one of the best players in NHL history to never win a Stanley Cup. With the North Stars, he couldn't do it. With the Capitals, he couldn't do it. With the Red Wings, he couldn't do it. The Lightning, no. The Panthers, no. It's really a shame, but Ciccarelli was a great player in his era. Has over 600 goals, has 1,200 points. A well-deserved Hall of Famer. An absolute travesty that he was never able to win a Stanley Cup. Tomorrow you may get the trifecta, you may only get part of the trifecta. I have no idea what the future holds. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the menu listed the lobster at market price. I didn't know that meant stock market price.